I am Fern, 34 years old, and until last year, I was just another marketing strategist at Apex Digital in Chicago. That was before I created a groundbreaking social media analytics strategy that changed everything. I never expected betrayal would come from Madison, the colleague who brought me coffee every morning. When she stole my work and claimed it as her own, I discovered something powerful. Intellectual property law can be your greatest ally in the corporate battlefield. If you are watching this from your office cubicle dealing with workplace drama too, hit like and subscribe. Trust me, you will want to see how I protected what was rightfully mine while keeping my dignity intact. My journey to Apex Digital was not a straight path. After graduating with honors in marketing from Northwestern University, I struggled to find my footing in Chicago's competitive marketing scene. For 2 years, I bounced between entry-level positions, at smaller agencies, always feeling like I was meant for something more. When a college friend mentioned an opening at Apex, I spent 3 days perfecting my portfolio and interview strategy. Apex was known for innovative digital marketing campaigns and had a client roster that included several Fortune 500 companies. Landing a job there felt like finally reaching the destination I had been working toward. From the outside, Apex appeared to have the perfect company culture. Our CEO, Robert Thompson, frequently talked about collaboration, innovation, and the Apex family. The modern open office design with its glass walls and community spaces seemed to reinforce this idea. During my first year, I truly believed in this vision. We had team-building retreats, brainstorming sessions, where everyone's ideas were supposedly valued, and frequent happy hours, where colleagues genuinely seemed to enjoy each other's company. It was during one of these happy hours that I first met Madison Parker. She had been with the company for 4 years, 1 year longer than me, and worked on a parallel team handling different clients. Madison had this way of making everyone feel special. She remembered birthdays, brought homemade cookies to meetings, and always seemed interested in what others were working on. We quickly developed what I thought was a friendship. She would stop by my desk with coffee in the mornings, and we would occasionally grab lunch together. Looking back, I should have noticed how our conversations always circled back to my current projects and strategies. Jack Bennett was another key colleague in our department, someone who became a true friend and ally. Unlike Madison's polished exterior, Jack was straightforward and genuine. He had been at Apex for 5 years and had turned down management positions twice because he preferred the creative work to the politics. We bonded over our shared distaste for unnecessary corporate meetings and our passion for data-driven marketing strategies. Madison reported directly to Director Diana Mitchell, a formidable woman who had climbed the corporate ladder with remarkable speed. Diana had a reputation for backing the winning horse, so to speak. She surrounded herself with people who made her look good, and was known for taking credit for her team's successes while distancing herself from failures. I did not report directly to her, but even in our limited interactions, I sensed a coldness that contrasted with her public persona. At the top of our corporate hierarchy was CEO Robert Thompson, a former marketing executive who had founded Apex 15 years earlier. He was charismatic and vision-oriented, but somewhat detached from the day-to-day operations. Most employees only saw him at quarterly meetings or company events. His leadership style was to empower directors like Diana and trust them to handle their departments, which created fiefdoms within the company. In this environment, I began developing what would become my revolutionary marketing strategy. The genesis of the idea came during a client meeting where we were struggling to explain why their expensive social media campaign was not converting to sales. I realized there was a massive gap in how we measured and interpreted social media analytics. Current models were tracking vanity metrics like likes and shares, but failing to connect these to actual consumer behavior. For 6 months, I dedicated myself to creating a new framework. I stayed late at the office nearly every night, analyzing patterns in data from our previous campaigns, reading academic papers on consumer psychology, and building a unique algorithm that could predict which social media interactions were most likely to lead to purchases. The potential impact was huge. My early tests showed we could potentially increase client conversion rates by 20% while actually reducing their ad spend. I documented everything meticulously, partly because that was my nature, and partly because I hoped to eventually publish my findings in a marketing journal. My work combined quantitative analysis with qualitative insights about how different demographics responded to various types of content. I created custom tracking tools that measured not just engagement, but meaningful engagement that correlated with consumer action. When I finally presented my strategy at a department meeting, the response was overwhelmingly positive. Our department head called it potentially game-changing, and several colleagues came up afterward to ask questions. Madison was particularly interested, asking specific questions about my methodology and requesting to see some of my research documents. At the time, I was flattered by her interest and happily shared some of my work with her, thinking it might lead to a collaboration. I had no idea I was handing her the very ammunition she would later use against me. 2 weeks after my presentation, the company announced a restructuring. Apex was creating a new client acquisition team to implement cutting-edge strategies that would attract bigger accounts. I figured I might be considered for a role on this team given my recent work. Instead, I was shocked when Madison was named as the team lead. The announcement came via a company-wide email praising Madison's innovative approach to analytics and her unique insights into consumer behavior language that sounded suspiciously similar to descriptions of my work. Despite the uncomfortable feeling in my stomach, I stopped by Madison's desk that afternoon to congratulate her. I wanted to believe the best about a person I considered a friend. Her smile seemed genuine as she accepted my congratulations, but there was something new in her eyes, a cool assessment that had not been there before. "Thanks, Fern. I am really excited about this opportunity," she said, adjusting the nameplate on her desk to face me more directly. "You know I might be able to pull you into some projects once I get settled. Your research skills could be useful." I nodded, unsure how to respond to being relegated to a research assistant role when my strategy might have been what landed her the position in the first place. But I told myself I was being paranoid. Madison was qualified in her own right, and perhaps the similarity in language was coincidental. That illusion shattered 3 days later during Madison's first presentation to potential new clients. Jack texted me from the meeting, "Are you seeing this? She is using your slides with her name on them." I could not believe it until Jack secretly recorded part of the presentation on his phone and showed me during lunch. There was Madison standing confidently at the front of the conference room, walking clients through my analytics framework. She had changed the color scheme and some of the wording, but the core concepts, the methodology, even some of the examples were unmistakably mine. "You need to say something," Jack insisted, his normally calm demeanor ruffled with indignation on my behalf. "This is not right, Fern. That is your work. You spent months developing it." "Maybe she asked permission from upper management," I suggested weakly. "Or maybe they decided my strategy should be implemented by her team. It could be a misunderstanding." Jack gave me a look that clearly communicated his disbelief. "A misunderstanding would be her using one of your ideas and forgetting to credit you. This is her presenting your entire strategy, as if she created it." That evening I rehearsed what to say before approaching Madison as she was leaving the office. I wanted to be professional, but clear to give her the opportunity to explain without creating an unnecessarily hostile situation. "Madison, I saw your presentation today." I began, keeping my voice even. "I noticed you were using the analytics framework I developed. I am glad you found it valuable, but I would appreciate if you would credit me when using my work." The friendly mask I had grown accustomed to slipped for just a moment, revealing a hardness I had never seen before. Then her smile returned, though it did not reach her eyes. "Oh, Fern, do not be silly. I have been working on similar concepts for months. Your presentation just happened to align with some of my thinking, but honestly, I have significantly enhanced what you proposed. This is business, not academia. We do not cite sources for every idea." She laughed lightly. "Besides, you should be flattered that elements of your work are being implemented. Most ideas never leave the conference room." I stood there stunned by the casual dismissal. "Madison, that was not elements of my work. That was my entire strategy down to the examples I used in my presentation." She sighed as if I was being tiresome. "Look, I am heading a major initiative now. I do not have time for this pettiness. We all build on each other's ideas here. That is what collaboration means." She glanced at her watch. "I have got to run. Let us talk later." "Okay." As she walked away, I felt a cold knot form in my stomach. This was not a misunderstanding. Madison had deliberately taken my work, knowing that in her new position she could claim it as her own with little consequence. Over the next few weeks, the situation only worsened. Madison's team began implementing my strategy with key clients, and the early results were impressive, just as my testing had predicted. In meetings, Madison would reference my innovative approach or my unique analytics framework while making direct eye contact with me, as if daring me to contradict her. Each instance felt like a small paper cut, painful and demoralizing. I began documenting these occurrences, forwarding emails where Madison claimed ownership of my ideas, saving presentation slides, and noting dates and witnesses. Jack continued to be my strongest ally, sometimes subtly mentioning in meetings that this reminds me of what Fern presented a few months ago, only to have his comments smoothly redirected by Madison. The emotional toll became increasingly difficult to bear. I began doubting myself, wondering if perhaps my ideas had not been as original as I thought. Maybe Madison really had been working on similar concepts. Maybe this was just how corporate America worked, and I needed to accept it. My sleep suffered, and I found myself dreading work each morning. Madison seemed to sense my vulnerability and became bolder in her undermining. In a department meeting, when I tried to contribute to a discussion about a new client, she interrupted with, "That is an interesting perspective, Fern. But let me explain how these analytics actually work in practice." The condescension in her tone made it clear she was positioning herself as the expert on concepts I had created. By the 1-month mark, Madison was claiming my strategy as her own on a daily basis. My work had become her ticket to corporate stardom, while I remained in the same position, watching my contribution be erased in real time. As Madison's team began implementing my strategy with clients, the results were undeniable. Conversion rates increased dramatically, just as my research had predicted, and clients were thrilled with the insights they were receiving. Madison was quick to take full credit, sending company-wide emails highlighting her team's successes and receiving public praise from Director Diana and even CEO Robert at our monthly all-hands meeting. Madison's innovative analytics framework is revolutionizing how we approach client campaigns, Robert announced to the assembled employees. This is exactly the kind of forward thinking that sets Apex apart from our competitors. I sat in the back row, my face burning, as I watched Madison accept the praise with a modest smile and a brief speech about how she had always been passionate about finding the connections between social media engagement and consumer behavior. Jack, sitting beside me, squeezed my arm in silent support. A full month had passed with Madison appropriating my work daily. What had started as shock had evolved into a simmering frustration that threatened to boil over. I began keeping a detailed journal, documenting every instance where Madison used my strategy without attribution. The list grew longer each day. The situation reached a breaking point during a presentation to Lux Brands, a major potential client that could potentially double our department's revenue. I was invited to the meeting as part of the support team, essentially to take notes and provide background information if needed. Madison led the presentation, walking the Lux team through her analytics framework and showing them projected results based on my research. "What impresses me most," said the Lux marketing director, "is how you have connected these seemingly abstract social media metrics to actual purchasing behavior. That has always been the missing link in our previous campaigns." Madison beamed. "It is all about understanding the psychology behind digital interaction. I have spent years developing this approach, testing it against traditional methods, until I perfected the algorithm we are showing you today." Years. She claimed to have spent years on work I had completed in the past 6 months. I gripped my pen so hard it nearly snapped, but maintained my professional composure throughout the meeting. Afterward, as the Lux team filed out with Madison escorting them, Jack approached me. "You cannot let this continue, Fern. This is beyond unfair. It is theft of intellectual property." His words struck a chord. I had been thinking of this as a personal betrayal, but Jack was right. This was professional theft, and I needed to address it as such. The next morning, I scheduled a meeting with our HR representative, Tara. I brought my documentation, including dated notes from my original research timestamps on files I had created months before Madison's promotion, and emails where I had discussed my strategy development with various team members, including Madison herself. Tara listened politely, occasionally nodding, but her expression remained carefully neutral. When I finished presenting my case, she sighed softly. "I understand your frustration, Fern, but Apex encourages a collaborative environment where ideas are shared freely. In our employee handbook, it clearly states that work done for the company belongs to the company, not to individual employees." I am not claiming ownership of the work product, I clarified. I understand that belongs to Apex. I am asking for proper attribution and recognition of my contribution. Tara tilted her head slightly. Attribution is not really part of our corporate culture. We function as teams here, and individual recognition can create unnecessary competition. "But Madison is receiving individual recognition for my work," I pointed out. "As team lead, Madison represents the collective output of everyone involved in the project." Tara replied smoothly, "I would encourage you to focus on your current assignments, rather than dwelling on who gets credit for past work." I left the meeting feeling dismissed and increasingly angry. That evening, I pored over the employee handbook looking for anything that might help my case. In the section on intellectual property, I found an interesting clause. While the company-owned work product created using company resources, there was specific language about novel methodologies and frameworks requiring proper documentation of creators for potential patent or copyright purposes. This discovery led me to research more about intellectual property in the workplace. I spent hours reading articles about employee rights regarding intellectual creations, learning about the differences between work for hire and independent development. I discovered that algorithms and analytical frameworks like mine could potentially qualify for protection, especially if they represented a novel approach. Meanwhile, I was not the only one at Apex feeling the effects of idea theft. During lunch one day, I overheard two designers from the creative department discussing how their concept for a client had been taken by their manager without credit. I approached them and carefully broached my own situation. They were sympathetic and shared similar experiences. "It happens all the time here," said Lisa, a graphic designer who had been with the company for 5 years. "The higher-ups take our best ideas, claim them as their own, and get the bonuses while we do the actual work." "Have you ever challenged it?" I asked. "Once," replied Marcus, the other designer. "I went to HR just like you did. Got the same runaround about collaborative environment and company ownership. After that, I was mysteriously passed over for projects for 3 months. I got the message. Their experiences confirmed what I was beginning to suspect: this was not just a Madison problem, but a systemic issue within Apex's culture. The company benefited from maintaining ambiguity around idea ownership, allowing managers to claim credit for their team's best work, while offering little recognition or compensation to the actual creators. As I continued gathering information and allies, Madison's boldness increased. Her team was awarded a Company Achievement Award for innovative analytics implementation, along with a substantial bonus that was distributed among her team members, none of whom had worked on the original strategy development. I watched the award ceremony from the back of the room, a plan already forming in my mind. If Apex would not enforce proper attribution internally, perhaps external legal frameworks could provide the leverage I needed. After weeks of documentation and research, I decided to follow proper channels one final time before taking more drastic measures. I formally requested a meeting with Director Diana Madison's supervisor and asked that Tara from HR be present as well. I spent an entire weekend organizing my evidence, creating a clear timeline of my strategy development, and preparing a professional presentation of my concerns. The meeting was scheduled for Tuesday afternoon in Diana's glass-walled office. I arrived 5 minutes early, dressed in my most professional attire, a navy blue suit that I reserved for client presentations. Diana and Tara were already seated, their expressions neutral but unwelcoming. "Thank you for meeting with me." I began opening my laptop to display my presentation. "I have asked for this meeting to address a serious concern regarding proper attribution of the social media analytics strategy currently implemented by Madison's team." I methodically walked them through the evidence, my original research notes, with timestamps, emails, discussing the development process meeting minutes, where I had first presented the strategy, and side-by-side comparisons of my original presentations with Madison's subsequent ones showing nearly identical content. As you can see, I concluded, the framework being credited to Madison was fully developed by me months before her promotion. While I understand this work belongs to Apex, I am requesting proper attribution as the creator of this strategy, particularly in client-facing communications. Diana leaned back in her chair, her manicured fingernails tapping lightly against the glass tabletop. Her expression had not changed throughout my presentation. "Are you finished?" she asked coldly. I nodded, maintaining eye contact despite the knot forming in my stomach. "Let me be clear, Fern. Madison was promoted because she demonstrates the leadership qualities and business acumen that Apex values. Part of leadership is synthesizing ideas from various sources and implementing them effectively, which is exactly what she has done. But these were not ideas from various sources, I objected. This was a complete documented strategy that I developed independently over months of research. Diana's smile was tight and did not reach her eyes. It is company policy to share knowledge freely. You need to learn to be a team player. The strategy belongs to Apex, not to you personally, and Madison is implementing it successfully, which is her job. I am not claiming ownership, I clarified. I am requesting attribution. There is a difference. Attribution. Diana's voice dripped with condescension. This is not academia, Fern. We do not cite sources in business presentations. We get results for our clients. And frankly, your fixation on getting credit, rather than contributing to the team's success, is concerning. Tara nodded in agreement. The employee handbook is clear that work product belongs to the company. Madison is using company resources appropriately in her role. There is actually a clause in the handbook about novel methodologies requiring proper documentation of creators, I pointed out, pulling up the specific page on my laptop. Diana waved her hand dismissively without even looking at the screen. That is for legal compliance in patent applications, not for determining who gets credit in client meetings. Honestly, Fern, you should be grateful to still have a position here given your apparent difficulty with our collaborative culture. The threat was thinly veiled but unmistakable. I felt my cheeks burn with humiliation and anger but maintained my composure. Thank you for your time, I said evenly, gathering my materials. I appreciate your perspective on the matter. I walked out of the office with my head held high. But as soon as I reached the privacy of a bathroom stall, tears of frustration spilled down my cheeks. I had followed all the proper procedures, presented irrefutable evidence, and still been dismissed and subtly threatened. The powerlessness I felt in that moment was overwhelming. That evening I called my mother, who had always been my sounding board during difficult times. I explained the situation through intermittent tears, the full weight of the past weeks finally crashing down on me. "Oh, honey," she said, her voice warm with concern. "That sounds terrible. But you know, this reminds me of when your father had his designs stolen by that manufacturing company." My father was an industrial designer who had once faced a similar situation. I had been too young to understand the details at the time, but I vaguely remembered the stress it had caused him. "What did Dad do about it?" I asked. "He consulted an intellectual property attorney," she replied. "It turned out he had more rights than the company led him to believe. The lawyer helped him protect his designs and negotiate fair compensation." The conversation planted a seed. The next day, while calling in sick to work, I began researching intellectual property rights for employees. I discovered that while employers generally own work created within the scope of employment, there were important nuances and exceptions. Particularly interesting was that novel analytical methods and algorithms could potentially qualify for certain protections, even when developed on company time, if they represented a significant innovation beyond existing industry practices. I spent the next 3 days diving deep into intellectual property law as it related to employment. I read case studies of employees who had successfully protected their innovations, examined the boundaries of work-for-hire doctrine, and learned about the specific types of intellectual property that could be protected in the marketing field. What became clear was that the situation was more complex than either Diana or HR had portrayed it. Yes, Apex owned the work product, but that did not automatically erase my rights to be recognized as the creator or to have some say in how my innovation was used and attributed. Armed with this knowledge, I made a decision that would change the course of my career. If Apex would not voluntarily recognize my contribution, perhaps legal protection would force their hand. I scheduled a consultation with Sofia Rodriguez, an intellectual property attorney specializing in employee rights. The law office of Rodriguez and Associates occupied the 15th floor of a downtown building with views of Lake Michigan. As I waited in the reception area, I questioned whether I was overreacting. Was I throwing away my career over pride? The memory of Diana's dismissive attitude and Madison's smug smile strengthened my resolve. This was not about pride. It was about justice and establishing boundaries that even corporations had to respect. Sofia Rodriguez was a sharply dressed woman in her late 40s, with an air of quiet confidence. After I explained my situation and showed her my documentation, she nodded thoughtfully. "Your case is more common than you might think," she said. "Many companies cultivate deliberate ambiguity around intellectual property ownership to benefit from employees' innovations while minimizing compensation or recognition." "Do I have any legal standing here?" I asked. "The employee handbook says work product belongs to the company." "Standard work product, yes," Sofia agreed. "But what you have created appears to be a novel analytical framework that goes beyond routine job duties. These cases exist in a gray area that often favors the employee more than companies want their staff to know." She explained that while Apex likely owned the implementation of my strategy, I might have rights regarding the underlying methodology, particularly if I could demonstrate its novel nature and my role as its creator. "What would you recommend?" I asked. "Two parallel approaches," Sofia replied. "First, we can file for copyright protection on your written description of the methodology, which includes your unique expression of the concept. Second, we can explore a provisional patent application for the algorithmic process itself." She cautioned that the process would not be quick or simple, but that even initiating these legal protections would create leverage. "Most companies want to avoid IP disputes with employees," she explained. "They are messy, potentially public, and can affect company valuation. Often just demonstrating serious intent to protect your rights will bring them to the negotiating table." Over the next 2 weeks, I worked closely with Sofia to prepare the necessary documentation. I provided her with my original research, notes the mathematical basis for my algorithm comparison analyses, showing how my approach differed from standard industry practices, and evidence of the strategy's effectiveness from Apex's own client results. The process was both challenging and empowering. For the first time since Madison's promotion, I felt like I was taking control of the situation rather than being victimized by it. Sofia helped me craft language that precisely defined my innovation without overreaching, focusing on the unique aspects that qualified for protection. While this legal work proceeded, I maintained a careful facade at Apex. I returned to the office after my illness and focused diligently on my assigned projects, giving no indication of my external actions. Madison continued to implement her strategy with increasing success, occasionally shooting me triumphant glances in meetings, as client results improved and her stock rose within the company. I also began quietly building a network of support within Apex. Lisa and Marcus, the designers who had shared similar experiences, became confidants. Through them, I connected with others who had experienced idea theft, forming a small but significant group of allies. We met for drinks after work, sharing stories and offering each other moral support. More importantly, they agreed to provide witness statements if necessary, confirming they had seen my original work before Madison claimed it as her own. My most unexpected ally emerged from the legal department. During a company happy hour, I found myself in conversation with Nathan, one of Apex's junior legal counsels. Without revealing my specific plans, I mentioned my interest in intellectual property rights within corporate settings. His response surprised me. The company handbook is deliberately vague on certain IP issues, he confided after a few drinks. There has been internal discussion about updating it, but management has resisted because the current ambiguity benefits them. Nathan explained that Apex had previously settled quietly with a former employee over a similar dispute, wanting to avoid establishing any precedent that might empower others to claim rights to their innovations. This information was valuable confirmation that my strategy had potential. After 3 weeks of preparation, Sophia filed the copyright registration for my written description of the analytics framework. The provisional patent application for the algorithmic process took another week to finalize, but was eventually submitted as well. Now it was time to wait for the registrations to be processed. Remember, Sophia advised the power is often in having initiated these protections, not necessarily in their final approval. We now have official documentation with timestamps that predate Madison's use of your strategy. During this waiting period, I continued my documentation of how Apex was using my work. Madison's team had now implemented the strategy with 5 major clients, generating over $2 million in additional revenue for the company. Articles about Apex's innovative approach began appearing in industry publications, with Madison quoted as the architect of the strategy. Each instance was carefully added to my growing file. I also prepared myself emotionally for the confrontation to come. I knew that once I revealed my legal countermove, there would be no turning back. My career at Apex would likely be over regardless of the outcome. I updated my resume, reached out to contacts at other agencies, and began quietly exploring other opportunities. Whatever happened, I wanted to be prepared. When the official confirmation of my copyright registration arrived in the mail, I felt a surge of vindication. The document formally recognized me as the author of the analytics framework that Madison had been presenting as her own. The provisional patent status notification followed a week later. Together, they provided the legal foundation I needed to move forward. The final piece fell into place unexpectedly. Jack forwarded me an email announcing a company-wide meeting where Madison would be presenting her innovative strategy directly to CEO Robert Thompson, with potential investors in attendance. The presentation would include detailed explanations of the methodology that was now legally registered as my intellectual property. "This might be your moment," Jack texted, along with the forwarded invitation. I called Sophia immediately to discuss the opportunity. She agreed that the timing was perfect. A public presentation to investors created an ideal scenario for asserting my rights. "Remember, your goal is recognition and fair compensation, not punishment," she reminded me. "Be professional, be factual, and let the documentation speak for itself." With my legal protections in place and the perfect moment approaching, I prepared for a confrontation that would either vindicate my work or end my career at Apex. Possibly both. The day of the company-wide meeting arrived with a strange sense of calm. I had spent the previous evening reviewing my documentation one final time, with Sophia ensuring every detail was in order. The manila envelope containing my copyright registration and provisional patent notification felt heavy in my leather portfolio as I entered the main conference room. The space was already crowded with employees from every department, along with several visitors wearing visitor badges whom I assumed were the potential investors. Madison stood at the front of the room beside a large screen, looking confident in a tailored red dress, chatting casually with Director Diana and CEO Robert Thompson. None of them paid any attention to me, as I took a seat in the middle of the room close enough to be seen, but not so close as to telegraph my intentions. Jack slid into the seat beside me, giving my arm a supportive squeeze. "Are you sure about this?" he whispered. I nodded. There was no turning back now. At precisely 3 o'clock, CEO Robert called the meeting to order. "We have gathered today to showcase one of Apex's most groundbreaking innovations," he announced proudly. Madison's social media analytics framework has transformed how we approach client campaigns, resulting in unprecedented conversion rates and client satisfaction. Madison stepped forward, her smile radiant as she accepted the introduction. "Thank you, Robert. I am excited to share the details of this strategy with all of you today." For the next 20 minutes, I watched as Madison presented my work with absolute confidence. She explained the innovative algorithm I had created, the psychological principles I had researched, and the testing methodology I had designed, all while speaking in the first person. I discovered, I developed, I tested my framework. With each slide, I felt a strange mix of emotions. There was anger, certainly, but also a detached fascination at watching someone so thoroughly appropriate another person's creation. The investors were clearly impressed, asking thoughtful questions that Madison answered using knowledge gained from my original research. When she finally concluded her presentation to enthusiastic applause, CEO Robert stepped forward again. "As you can see, this kind of innovation is what sets Apex apart from our competitors. Are there any questions before we wrap up?" The moment had arrived. I raised my hand, and Robert nodded in my direction, clearly not expecting what was about to happen. "I have something important to add to this presentation," I said, rising from my seat with my portfolio in hand. My voice was steady, betraying none of the nerves fluttering in my stomach. "Something that concerns the intellectual property rights related to this strategy." A confused silence fell over the room. Robert's expression shifted from polite interest to concern while Madison's smile froze on her face. "What do you mean?" Fern Robert asked, a slight edge to his voice. I moved to the front of the room, standing a few feet from Madison. "The analytics framework that has just been presented was developed by me, not by Madison. I have extensive documentation proving that I created this methodology 6 months ago before Madison was promoted to her current position." Director Diana stepped forward, her face tight with anger. "We have already addressed this, Fern. Company policy clearly states." I cut her off by opening my portfolio and removing the legal documents. "I am familiar with company policy, Director Diana. However, there are federal laws that supersede internal policies when it comes to intellectual property rights." I handed the copyright registration and provisional patent notification to Robert. "These are official recognitions of my authorship of this analytics framework and methodology. As you can see, they predate Madison's first presentation of this strategy by several months." Robert studied the documents with growing alarm while Madison's face drained of color. The investors exchanged uneasy glances. "Furthermore, I continued, my confidence growing. I have documented over 30 instances where my work has been presented without attribution, generating significant revenue for Apex. My intellectual property attorney advises that this constitutes a substantial legal liability for the company." At the mention of a lawyer, Robert's head snapped up. "You have consulted an attorney about this matter?" "Yes. Sofia Rodriguez of Rodriguez and Associates. She specializes in intellectual property disputes in corporate settings." The atmosphere in the room had transformed completely. What had begun as a celebration of innovation had become a potential legal crisis. One of the investors whispered something to his colleague, who promptly made notes on his tablet. I think we need to discuss this privately, Robert said, his voice tight. Diana, Madison, Fern, please come with me to my office. Everyone else, thank you for your time. We will reconvene later. As the room cleared, Jack caught my eye and gave me a subtle thumbs up. Madison looked shell-shocked, while Diana's expression had shifted from anger to calculation. I could almost see her considering how to distance herself from the situation. In Robert's spacious office, we were joined by Nathan from the legal department, who had been summoned urgently. I presented my complete documentation, including the original development timeline evidence of Madison's appropriation and the legal protections I had secured. Madison attempted to defend herself. I enhanced her basic idea significantly. What I presented today is fundamentally different from her original concept. I silently placed side-by-side comparisons of our presentations on Robert's desk, highlighting identical methodologies, examples, and even phrasing. Nathan reviewed the materials with growing concern. These IP registrations appear to be in order, he confirmed to Robert, and the similarities between the original work and current implementation are problematic from a legal standpoint. She signed an employee agreement, Diana interjected. All work product belongs to the company. Standard work product, yes. Nathan agreed, echoing Sophia's earlier assessment. But novel methodologies and frameworks can exist in a gray area, particularly when they represent significant innovation beyond routine job duties. The fact that Fern has already secured these registrations complicates our position considerably. Robert remained silent throughout this exchange, his expression unreadable. Finally, he turned to me. What exactly are you seeking here, Fern? I had prepared for this question. 3 things: formal recognition as the creator of this strategy, fair compensation for its use and the revenue it has generated, and assurance that proper attribution will be given in all future implementations. And if we refuse? Diana asked coldly. Nathan answered before I could. Then we potentially face a public intellectual property dispute that could affect client confidence, company valuation, and our reputation in the industry, not to mention possible financial damages if a court rules in her favor. Robert sighed deeply. Let us take a step back. This situation has clearly been mishandled. He shot a pointed look at Diana. I want to resolve this fairly and without unnecessary conflict. Over the next 3 hours, we negotiated terms. Robert called Apex's outside counsel, who confirmed the legitimacy of my position after reviewing the documents. Madison said little, her earlier confidence completely deflated. Diana attempted to minimize her own involvement, suggesting that confusion about proper credit was a departmental miscommunication rather than a deliberate appropriation. By evening, we had reached an agreement. In principle, Apex would formally acknowledge me as the creator of the analytics framework in all future client communications. I would receive a percentage of revenue generated by the strategy's implementation, backdated to its first use. And most surprisingly, I would be offered a new position, leading a newly created innovation team with the authority to develop and implement new strategies with proper attribution guaranteed in my employment contract. Madison would retain her position, but would transition to managing client relationships rather than strategy development. The terms would be formalized in a written agreement drafted by both legal teams. As we prepared to leave Robert's office, Madison approached me. The mask of friendship had completely fallen away, replaced by barely concealed hostility. You will not last long in that new position, she hissed under her breath. You have made powerful enemies today. I met her gaze steadily. I have not made enemies, Madison. I have established boundaries. There is a difference. The formal settlement was finalized within 2 weeks. The agreement included everything we had discussed in Robert's office, plus additional protections I had not anticipated. Apex would pay me a lump sum of $75,000 as compensation for past usage of my strategy, plus a 3% royalty on all revenue it generated going forward. My new position as Innovation Director came with a 40% salary increase and explicit language regarding intellectual property rights and proper attribution. The company also committed to implementing a new creator attribution system for all strategic innovations, ensuring that others would not face the same situation I had endured. This last point was particularly satisfying as it meant my stand would benefit colleagues beyond just myself. Madison's fall from grace was swift, but not as complete as I might have expected. While she lost her status as the brilliant innovator, she proved adept at client management and relationship building. Her team was restructured to focus on implementation rather than development, reporting directly to Robert rather than Diana. We maintained a coldly professional relationship, acknowledging each other in meetings but nothing more. Director Diana faced more significant consequences. An internal review revealed that Madison was not the first employee whose work she had allowed to be appropriated without credit. CEO Robert, concerned about company culture and potential legal liability, removed her from her director position and reassigned her to a lateral role with less authority. 6 months later, she left Apex for a position at a smaller agency. My relationship with other colleagues evolved in interesting ways. Some who had silently witnessed Madison's theft approached me privately to express their admiration for my courage. Others seemed uncomfortable around me, perhaps concerned that I might be litigious or difficult. Jack, true to his character, remained my steadfast ally and eventually joined my innovation team as associate director. The most surprising development came from Lisa and Marcus, the designers who had shared similar experiences. Inspired by my success, they approached me about advocating for better recognition of creative contributions throughout the company. With Robert's cautious blessing, we formed an informal advisory group on intellectual property rights and creative attribution, eventually developing guidelines that were adopted company-wide. My new role brought both challenges and opportunities. Building the innovation team from scratch required me to develop leadership skills I had not previously needed. I made it a point to ensure that every team member received proper credit for their contributions, creating a culture of intellectual generosity with clear boundaries. Our team quickly gained a reputation for both creativity and fairness. The healing process was neither quick nor linear. There were days when the memory of Madison's betrayal and Diana's dismissal still stung sharply. I sometimes questioned whether I had overreacted, whether the professional risks I had taken were worth it. During these moments of doubt, I would open the folder containing my copyright registration and remind myself of what I had stood up for. The experience changed me in fundamental ways. The conflict-avoidant person who had initially hesitated to confront Madison was gone, replaced by someone who understood the importance of establishing clear boundaries and advocating for herself. I became more discerning about workplace relationships, recognizing the difference between genuine collegiality and strategic friendships. Perhaps most significantly, I developed a personal philosophy about intellectual contribution and recognition. I came to believe that protecting one's work is not selfish or contrary to collaboration. Rather, clear attribution creates the foundation for true collaboration by establishing trust and respect. When people know their contributions will be recognized, they become more willing to share freely. This philosophy guided my approach to mentoring younger women who joined Apex. I made it a priority to help them navigate the complex waters of corporate politics and intellectual property. Your ideas have value, I would tell them. Never let anyone convince you that seeking recognition for your work is inappropriate or self-promoting. 6 months after my confrontation with Madison, I was invited to speak at an industry conference about innovation in digital marketing. As I prepared my presentation, I reflected on how differently things might have turned out had I not found the courage to stand up for myself. My strategy might still be generating millions for Apex, with Madison receiving the accolades and advancement opportunities. I might still be in my original position, my confidence slowly eroded by watching someone else claim credit for my work. Instead, I stood at the podium before hundreds of marketing professionals, introduced as the creator of an analytics framework that was changing how agencies approach social media campaigns. The sense of validation in that moment was worth every difficult conversation, every sleepless night, every moment of doubt. Life is full of people who will take what is not theirs if given the opportunity. Sometimes they are strangers, but often they are colleagues, friends, even mentors. The most important lesson I learned through this experience is that standing up for yourself and your work is not just about personal vindication. It is about creating environments where innovation can flourish, because creators know they will be respected. Have you ever had your ideas or work stolen by someone else? How did you handle it? I would love to hear your stories in the comments below. Remember that your intellectual contributions have value, and you deserve recognition for them. If this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with others who might be facing similar challenges in their workplace. Together, we can create professional environments where creativity and innovation are properly attributed and rewarded. Thank you for listening to my journey, and I wish you the courage to stand up for your own.